Boys and girls, we are going to be working with absolute value today. We are going to be focusing on 6NS5, 6NS6A, and 6NS7, C through D. And we're going to extend this through Chapter 5. Our goal is we're going to be able to identify a number and its opposite. We're also going to be able to graph these integers on the number line and represent it using the symbols for absolute value. Our vocab for today is absolute value and opposite. And I need for you to make sure that you understand that an absolute value and an opposite are different. They are not the same thing, okay? Absolute value is the distance between a number and 0 on a number line. So it's the distance from that number to 0. With your absolute value, I want you to understand that your answer will always be positive. Always. Okay? Absolute value will always be positive, no matter what. Okay? As long as they're within the absolute value bars. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. Next, opposites, they're numbers that are the same distance from 0 in opposite directions. So with opposites, I can have negative numbers. I can also have positive numbers, but I can have negative numbers. All right, second thing that I want you to be aware of, and I want you to remember, is that 0 is not a negative number, nor it is not a positive number. Okay, 0 is its own opposite. So if it asks you what is the opposite of 0, you're going to say 0. What's the absolute value of 0? 0. All right. Okay, so let's see here. So it says find the opposite of negative 12. Well, the opposite of negative 12 is a positive 12. You don't need to put the plus sign in front. Okay, it's automatically assumed that it is positive if you don't have a negative sign there. Next, identify the opposite of the opposite. So we have 2 here. Okay, so the opposite of 3 is negative 3. Then the opposite of negative 3 is 3. So you could do something like, here's 3. Well, the opposite is negative 3. But then the opposite, again, of negative 3 is 3. So my answer would be a positive 3. Now, if it asked you for another opposite, then it would be a negative 3. Okay? Normally, when you're on an even opposite, like opposite of the opposite of the opposite of the opposite, you know, when there's 4 of them, when there's 6 opposites, it always ends up being the number that you started off with. Okay? Here we go. We're going to evaluate the absolute value of negative 7. Now, these lines, those are absolute value bars. Okay? When you see that, they're talking about the distance to 0 on a number line. So remember what I said, absolute value will always be positive. So the absolute value of negative 7 would be 7, positive 7. Okay, here we go. So we're going to evaluate the absolute value of negative 12 plus the absolute value of 7. So we have the absolute value of negative 12 plus the absolute value of 7. Okay, so let's focus right here. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. I'm bringing the addition sign down because it's not in any absolute value bars. And then the absolute value of 7 is 7. So 12 plus 7 is 19, positive 19. Okay, we're coming down here. We're going to evaluate the absolute value of 11 minus the absolute value of a negative 9. Okay, so the absolute value of 11 is 11. We're going to bring down our minus sign. And then the absolute value of negative 9 is 9. Okay, 11 minus 9 is 2. Okay, now remember, this negative sign, this minus sign came straight down. This was a positive. Okay, same thing with this. This came straight down. So now it says a player in a game has negative 10 points. His opponent has 12 points. What is the distance between two scores? Okay, so I need for you to remember, boys and girls, that when we are working on a number line, okay, here's 0. Over here, I'm going to have a negative 10. Over here, I'm going to have a positive 12. Okay, please remember, it's saying, what is the distance between the two scores? Which means I would need to know the distance from here all the way to here. Okay, so that's why they're using the absolute value. So what they would do, turn this around here so you can see, we would write it as the absolute value of negative 10, okay, because it's going to go 10, then I'm going to have to add another 12. So I'm going to have to add the absolute value of 12. Okay, so the absolute value of negative 10 is 10, plus the absolute value of 12 is 12, which equals 22 points. Okay, the difference is 22 points between the two. So now it says, what is the opposite of 3? Well, the opposite of 3 is negative 3. Okay, here we go. What is the opposite of negative 2? So if I start with negative 2 and I say, okay, what is the opposite? Well, the opposite would be 2. But then it says, well, what's the opposite of that now? Negative 2. So the opposite of negative 2 is negative 2. All right, so down here we're going to evaluate. Okay, so we have the absolute value of 2 plus the absolute value of 7. Absolute value of 2 is 2 plus the absolute value of 7 is 7. 2 plus 7 is 9. We have a positive 9 there. Absolute value of negative 9 plus absolute value of 3. The absolute value of negative 9 is 9 plus the absolute value of 3 is 3. My answer is 9 plus 3 is 12. The absolute value of negative 8 minus the absolute value of negative 2. So the absolute value of negative 8 is 8. Bring down my minus sign. The absolute value of negative 2 is 2. My answer is 8 minus 2 is 6. And that is what we're going to be doing today. Now, on the second part of our class notes, I have, let me see if I can find it. I just have some rules for you to follow. And it talks about absolute, and it shows you the number line and how it goes back and forth. So you can take a look at that. I don't have it with me here. Nope, I don't. So it just talks about this. having an absolute value, okay, and just for you to understand that no matter what, on a number line, the absolute value of -10 will be 10. The absolute value of 12 will be 12. Just the distance from that number to 0. Please make sure that you are writing out the problem, showing your work, and then you can transfer your answers right on to Canvas. If you have any questions, please let me know.